All right, so we're going to talk about the mirror effect and how caregiving reflects our inner world. And before I get into the info, I do want to invite you all to participate in the post survey. So I send out a survey after all of my trainings, and it's just a few questions, and it's not mandatory, but it is an opportunity for you to share some feedback with me. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, and also ideas for upcoming presentations. I do take a lot of what you guys offer in that space to curate information for the following month. So if you have any ideas, or if there's something I've done in the past that you want me to revisit and maybe do a deeper dive on, please don't hesitate to fill out the survey and give me that information. So if you want the survey, just put your email address in the chat box and I will send it to you at the end of our presentation today. Speaking of, this is going to be a bit of a shorter presentation. It's only about 9 slides, but I do hope that the information is useful to you and that it's something that maybe sparks a little bit of introspection, that maybe gets you thinking differently about your caregiving and how you respond in that space. So this presentation today is really going to be about your inner world as a caregiver, okay? So we can explore the ways that caregiving reveals unmet needs, maybe some inner wounding, and then also some opportunities for healing, okay? So we'll go ahead and get into the information. Oh, also, these trainings are recorded, so if you want to watch them back, they're usually posted within 24 hours on our YouTube channel and also on our website. But if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, just add them into the chat, or at the end, I'll turn off the recording and we can have a conversation. So that way you guys aren't on the internet. If you don't want to be on the internet, we can just do all that afterwards and I'll turn the recording off, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get into the information today. So what is the mirror effect? Okay, so we all know that caregiving is not just a role, it is a relationship, right? The person you're caring for is probably somebody that you care for deeply, right? Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, but whoever it is, it's somebody that you obviously care enough about to maintain their health and well-being as a caregiver, right? So it's a relationship, it's not just a role. But this relationship, like all relationships, can act like a mirror, okay? So this can reflect parts of ourselves that maybe we don't see clearly in our day to day. And sometimes what we see is beautiful, right? Sometimes we see our tenderness. Sometimes we see our resilience, right? But sometimes we can see things that are maybe uncomfortable or painful, or maybe they are just a very tender spot, maybe that we hadn't really addressed head on in the past. But as we caregive, we realize that these things start to come up, right? And so that's not uncommon, but I think it's important to be made aware of that, so that way we can navigate it a little easier, right? We don't want to be adding stress on an already stressful scenario, but sometimes it just naturally bubbles up, right? So the mirror effect is referring to the way that caregiving, especially intense or long-term caregiving, reflects back to us our internal experiences, okay? So we may notice parts of ourselves that are calm, compassionate, resilient, right? But we can also meet our impatience, resentment, fear, or even some wounding, right? Maybe you're caring for somebody who in the past wasn't very kind to you. Maybe they wounded you deeply, but because of duty, you are now in a position where you're caregiving for them. And so there's a lot of spaces that can create a nervous system activation. Okay, some people say triggers. Some people are triggered by the word trigger, but really what it is, it's a nervous system reaction, right? A nervous system response to stress. And that's what the mirror effect is all these things that maybe we didn't think were problematic, but then we get in these high stress situations and we realize, oh, this is something I might need to work on a little bit, right? So these reflections are not indicators that you're failing in any way, shape, or form. But it is a way that maybe your nervous system is inviting you to kind of explore what's hanging out beneath the surface, right? I'll just use myself as an example. motherhood in and of itself was traumatic for me. As much as I love my children and I'm glad that they're a part of my life, it uncovered a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot that you find out about yourself when you're stretched really thin, right? When you are burnt out, your candle's being burnt at both ends. You don't have the reserves to be as resilient or as responsive as you'd like to be, and so you become more reactive. Okay, that's just the nature of it. Okay, so if we take time to try to listen to those reactions or those thoughts and say, what are you trying to tell me? What's surfacing here that I can address? Then those activating moments, those triggering moments, they're not as derailing as they can be or have been. Okay. So what gets reflected in the role as a caregiver? Okay. So when you step into a caregiving role, you are not walking into this space as a blank slate, right? You have a whole history of your life prior to this, values, learned behaviors, right? So everything that you've been taught about love or duty or identity, this is what you're bringing into your caregiving space, right? And caregiving amplifies those stories. So, for example, if you grew up believing that you had to earn love by being helpful, caregiving might feel like your value is on the line, right? If boundaries were never respected as a child, it might feel almost impossible for you to try to set them now, right? Even when you're overwhelmed. So you can see how there's things that we've learned in our lifetime about ourselves and how we navigate the world that come into play as a caregiver. Okay. So I'll just read you this slide here. What gets reflected in the role? So our beliefs about responsibility and worth, and sometimes how those two intertwine. Childhood conditioning and attachment patterns, right? How do you feel safe in relationship to other people? What's your attachment style? It reveals unmet needs and suppressed emotions, right? Like, oh, I didn't realize I was so resentful. I didn't realize I was so sad, right? Um, it can reveal our desire for control, safety, or approval, right? Maybe we didn't realize that we were rigid in this space until we had to operate in a high stress scenario, right? We're not as flexible as we thought we were. And then finally, old wounds that are seeking recognition or repair. Okay. And again, this can be very prominent in those spaces if you're caring for a parent or maybe even a spouse, right? Or a friend or family member that maybe you had a falling out with and now you're caregiving for them, or maybe you guys weren't always on the best terms, right? And so a lot of those older wounds can kind of resurface, right? You think, oh, I thought I was past this, but I'm not, right? And again, this isn't about you not being able to do what you do well. This is about you being a human being, and being in a high stress situation will make you face a lot of these things that were easier for you to kind of distract yourself from before. But when it's right there in your face, it's kind of hard, right? So this is the mirror, right? Parts of you that were silenced, they start to kind of talk again, right? Parts of you that were overburdened, they start to kind of hurt again, right? And so when we reflect, really what it is we're inviting ourselves to take a closer look and see, how can I heal this, right? How can these things that are surface be addressed in a way that's healing and healthy, that allows us to move forward, right? So a lot of times when these feelings surface, our gut instinct is to distract or numb or cope in some way, right? So we doom scroll, maybe we drink a little bit more alcohol than we normally do, maybe we abuse over-the-counter prescriptions or over-the-counter medications or prescriptions, maybe we doom scroll on social media. There's things that we do to kind of distract ourselves, but I hope that this presentation encourages you that when those feelings start to bubble up, we don't automatically go to deflect or distract. We sit and listen. Okay, we take some time to ourselves and we really look inside and say, what is this coming up? What is the source? And how can I manage this? How can I navigate this a little bit better? So it's really just a way, like, how can I heal from this now that I'm aware of it, right? So projection and personal history, okay? when old wounds wear new faces, okay? So we sometimes project our past experiences into the present. This is just normal human behavior, right? Um, Projection happens when we unknowingly assign old emotions or roles onto people in our current lives. Okay, so in caregiving, this can be really common, but also incredibly confusing. Okay, like for example, maybe the person you're caring for reminds you of someone who neglected you. Maybe they are someone who neglected you, and now you're having to provide 24/7 care for them. That's a hard spot to be in, right? Even if you are the most kind, compassionate person on the planet, you're a human, right? You're a person. And so that can be really hard to be in that space emotionally. Um, Maybe their neediness stirs up feelings of helplessness from your own childhood, right? I can't do all these things that you need me to do, and now I feel helpless, right? Maybe their demands kind of echo expectations that your family once placed on you, right? Or maybe they're the source of those expectations that were placed on you. Okay. And sometimes if we have these woundings in our childhood, we grow up and we get out of that space and we're healing and we feel like we're on track. And then you get, into this caregiving space with that person, right? And then it all comes back, right? And you realize maybe I haven't healed as much as I thought I did, right? And that's okay. That's the nature of healing, right? It's almost always a constant thing, okay? So when we're unaware of the patterns, then we kind of just respond on autopilot, right? We maybe get frustrated, maybe we lash out, maybe we become very introverted, maybe we shut down, maybe we cope with food or alcohol, or maybe we push people away and burn bridges in relationships, right? And we might not even know why we're responding that way, but our nervous system is detecting some sort of overwhelm or what's I'm looking for, like an unsafety in that space, like a threat. And so our natural response is to just, without thinking, we just respond, or we just react, right? But when we recognize what's going on, then we can start to respond with intention, right? Rather than just reaction. And this can be a very subtle shift in the way you perceive things. It could even just be a matter of like, I feel myself getting riled up, so I'm going to take a pause and breathe. And that right there, just that little buffer can make or break your response, right? Am I going to yell and slam the door, or am I going to take a deep breath and walk into my backyard, right? You're going to respond either way. It's just about how are you going to intentionally respond now that you're aware, okay? So I'll go ahead and read this slide here. So we sometimes project our past experiences into the present. Caregiving relationships may activate unresolved emotions. Anger, guilt, or resentment may be less about the person you're caring for and more about your own history repeating itself, okay? And becoming aware of projection opens the door to choose healing, okay? And I experienced this in my own life, right? I think I was good. I thought I was good. It didn't bother me. I was healed from this. And then the overwhelm happened, and then the stress happened, and then the not taking care of myself happened. And so my reserves were depleted. And guess what? I wasn't as good as I thought I was, right? It happens. So really, this is just about having some insight into our internal world. What's going on? Why do I react this way, right? Because our reactions do have roots, right? They don't just come out of nowhere. So we need to get curious about them, right? What is my anxiety telling me? What is my anger telling me? What is my grief telling me, right? We don't just say, well, I'm just upset, and then, cope by numbing. We can, not for very long, right? But we stop and say, why am I feeling this way? Why is this one thing that they did cause this huge reaction from me, right? Because it's unearthing deeply rooted pain or deeply rooted beliefs that are hard to face, right? And again, this is very, very common. This is not an individual thing. This is almost an everybody thing, right? So resistance is a signal, okay? Not a character flaw. It's not a moral failing. Okay, when we have emotional pushback, that is a normal response to nervous system overload, nervous system burnout. okay? Because what your nervous system is designed to do is protect you. And that is from physical threat, emotional threat, all of that, okay? So if you're feeling overwhelmed, overburdened, drawn, the well is dry, okay, your nervous system is going to respond as, I'm going to resist this so I can heal, so I can catch my breath, okay? So feeling irritation, avoidance, or shutdown, guess what? That means you're a human being. Congratulations. Okay, you're not failing at life. You're a human being. Okay, resistance will often signal that a boundary has been crossed or a need has been unmet. Okay, so when we feel that resistance to the job or the person or the doctor's appointment or whatever it is, this is your nervous system saying we need to take a breather, right? And we need to see what's going on. Okay, it's not a flaw, it's a natural process of our nervous system. So instead of shaming that feeling, we just listen to it, get curious, right? What is this part of me trying to protect, right? Is it my peace? Is it my autonomy? Is it my identity? Is it my resources, right? You're not just getting angry and frustrated out of nowhere. There's a reason for it. So we just got to figure out what that is, right? So often, caregivers, you're going to judge yourself really harshly when this resistance shows up, right? You might be thinking, I should be more patient. I should be more grateful, right? I shouldn't be this frustrated. But resistance isn't us behaving badly. This is, like I said, a biointelligence, right? This is your body's natural response, the natural intelligence to protect you, right? It's saying your body and your psyche are signaling to you something doesn't feel safe, something doesn't feel fair, something doesn't feel sustainable, okay? And it's not lying to you. Okay, it may be exaggerating because you have a very low threshold for stress, but the message it's trying to send you is not made up, right? You just listen to it, see what it's trying to say to you. So instead of asking, how do I make this feeling go away, right? Try asking, what part of me is speaking, right? What story does it carry? What conditioning, what narrative was I taught in my younger years that's now surfacing today, okay? Are you tired? Are you lonely? Are you protecting a younger version of yourself whose needs were not met? Right? And all of this happens kind of subconsciously. Like we're not consciously choosing the response of our nervous system. It's just happening, right? And so we may not be able to choose how our nervous system responds, but we can choose how we respond to that response, right? We can choose if we're going to try to numb that feeling or if we're going to try to investigate it. Okay. So when we shift from judging ourselves, judging those feelings, to becoming curious, that's when we transform that resistance into wisdom. Okay, that's where the healing begins. Why do I feel the way that I feel that makes me react the way that I react? And once you figure that out, once you identify the unmet need, and then you meet that need, guess what? Your nervous system starts to settle. It starts to repair, it starts to heal. And so then you're not activated or triggered as much as you used to be. Because think of it as this way. A nervous system response, emotional resistance or what have you, is kind of like a toddler who's always like, who's wanting maybe gummy bears, right? We'll just say, they're going to keep pestering you and asking, can I have that? Can I have that? I want it. Can I have that? Right? I'm not saying you got to give your kids gummy bears. This is just my metaphor. But once you address what the toddler needs, they quit pestering you, until the next thing. The nervous system's the same way. So you can shove it down, you can numb it, you can ignore it, but it will always come back and tell you this need is being unmet. Okay. So if you don't want to feel that way anymore, you have to identify the need and then meet the need. Okay. And then it'll quiet. So the echo of unmet needs, right? I did a training about a year and a half ago called The Child Within. And I talked about how high stress, chronic stress can trigger or activate our inner child. And so the inner child, if you think about it, it might sound kind of, fantastical or woo woo or whatever. It's not to say that there's a literal, child version of yourself living in you. Neurobiologically is what we're saying. There are patterns that you learned as a child growing up that impact how you navigate your adult world. And if those stories that you were told as a child are distorted, untrue, or surrounded around not being safe or not having your needs met, that inner child is going to consistently show up in your adult life trying to get those needs met. Okay. And caregiving is almost a guaranteed catalyst for that inner child because it's so stressful physically, financially, emotionally, right? It demands a lot from you. And whenever we're depleted and overwhelmed and overburdened, these wounds start to show up. Okay. So caregiving can stir those forgotten needs to be seen, to be held, to be valued, and to be chosen. And you might find yourself parenting others while aching to be parented, right? You have to be the parent, quote unquote, even if you're not caring for a child, but you are now responsible for maintaining the well-being of another person, right? So you are kind of in that parental role, whether it's, an actual parental relationship or not. And so when you are hoping or wanting guidance and security and value and, all those things, but then you have to externalize it to somebody else, right? You can start to feel a little bit of resentment there, right? I'm meeting all these needs for somebody else and none of mine are being met. Okay. And we might not be consciously or cognitively saying these words to ourselves, but this can be kind of like that, emotional soup that we're kind of stewing in all the time. So recognizing that, I mean, it's really, it can be transformative, right? Realizing what's going on. And then we can start to offer ourselves what's been missing. And that's another way that we can heal ourselves, right? So if your own inner child never fully got what they needed, it can be really difficult to even voice that you have needs, right? You kind of conditioned to keep it to yourself after a while. You might be kind of pouring from a well that was never filled, right? Maybe you start resenting the constant giving that nobody gave to you. And so these are the echoes that we're talking about. These are the echoes of unmet needs asking, will somebody see me now? Will someone meet these needs for me now? Okay. Because when we're giving and giving and giving and giving, eventually we start to feel like we need some of that nourishment back, right? And if you grew up in a space where you were neglected and your needs weren't met, then when you get to a space of depletion, those old childhood stories start to come up. Well, what about me? I was, my needs were unmet my whole life. And then you start to be resentful and then you want to protect yourself and then you get really rigid and then you push back, right? It's normal. That's what happens. So caregiving can give you a chance to become what you always needed, right? So not only for someone else, but for yourself, right? So this is what in the therapy world we call reparenting. And all that means is that we are now in a place where we can offer ourselves the safety and the softness and the structure and maybe even somebody celebrating us that maybe we didn't get when we were growing up, right? So this is a way that we can tend to ourselves and really start showing up differently for the people in our space, right? Not from a place of depletion, but from a place of wholeness, okay? So you might not, none of us are gonna be able to go back in time and be, in a different scenario with different circumstances and get a different outcome, right? We can't literally do that. But what we can do is reflect, what is my resentment telling me? What is my anger telling me? Oh, it's telling me that I'm not getting my needs met. And this bothers me because when I was younger, I didn't get my needs met and I felt very unsafe, right? So you can see how then you can say, well, if that's what's going on, then how do I meet my needs, right? Do I need to sleep? Do I need to socialize? Do I need to do something that is, beautiful and fun just for the sake of the joy that I experience, right? But if you don't do that introspection, if you don't do that reflection, if you don't look in the mirror and see what is actually going on, then you're just going to distract, right? You're just going to deflect, you're just going to cope, and it's never going to be healed. It's always just going to kind of stay in this live wire activation under the surface, just waiting to pop back up, okay? So caregiving can stir forgotten needs to be seen, held, valued, or chosen. We may find ourselves parenting others while aching to be parented. This isn't a sign of weakness. This is just recognizing what's going on. And then when we offer ourselves what was missing, we can begin to heal, okay? So this is where we're going to kind of do a little bit of self-reflection, okay? So this is a personal inquiry and integration, okay? Of course, this is not a therapy session. I'm not diagnosing anybody. I'm not creating a treatment plan for you. I'm just inviting you to have some introspection now, and then maybe you can talk with your mental health professional about that, or we can have a care chat after this, and we can kind of dig into it a little bit deeper if you want to. So what emotions arise most often in your caregiving role? You don't have to answer out loud. Just think to yourself. Where might those stories have begun? For many of us, it's way, way, way back in the beginning. And what might these feelings be asking us now to tend, right? Do we need softness? Do we need understanding? Do we need sensitivity to things, right? So this is what we want to call our mirror moment, right? We're not judging, we're not fixing, we're just witnessing, we're just getting curious, right? So when you think about the feelings in your caregiving journey, is it guilt over responsibility, right? That you can't escape from? Maybe you're feeling resentment or exhaustion, or maybe even just like a longing to what your life looked like before you were caregiving, right? Where you had more free time, where you had more social interactions, where you had more resources, right? So each of these emotions has a root, right? And it has a message. And so often, again, they trace back to childhood roles and family expectations or moments of unmet need, okay? So when we do these reflective practices, we just really want to be gentle with what we find, okay? We're not judging ourselves in this space. We're just remembering, where does this hurt, right? And that remembrance can be incredibly healing, okay? So when we have this reflection, right, when we look in the mirror and see ourselves, we don't just see ourselves, we see parts of ourselves that want to be loved, right, that want to be protected, that want to be held sacred and safe, okay? So caregiving can be incredibly exhausting emotionally because it's not just the physical tasks that we're doing. It's not just the financial resources that are being depleted. And it's not even just the emotional toll it takes to care for another person. It's all this other stuff that resurfaces that maybe we didn't even think was there. Okay. And that stuff I think we don't talk about as often, but it definitely is a major component to how resilient and how sustainable our caregiving is, right? Because if we're just kind of an open wound the whole time, that's going to be incredibly difficult to rein in and be present with the relationship of caregiving, right? I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so from reflection to repair, okay? So we've looked in the mirror, we've seen the hurt, we've seen the pain, we've identified the problem, right? So now comes repair, right? Not all at once, obviously, right? There's not going to be some grand gesture that's going to, soften every hard corner, right? But these are going to be small, intentional, loving, self-compassionate choices, okay? So it might look like saying no without apologizing, right? No is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain your no. You can if you want to, but you don't have to, okay? It might mean just going outside to breathe for 5 minutes, right? Signaling to your nervous system that you can calm down, right? You don't have to react. It might be letting yourself cry without explaining it away, right? Sometimes people think that crying is like, the last thing you want to do, right? You don't want to show weakness in that way or what have you, right? Or this isn't even a cryable offense. Why am I crying? Okay. Because you need to. There is a hormonal release when we cry that's actually really good for our nervous system. It soothes it. So when you deny yourself the gift of tears, all you're doing is telling your body that that feeling, that emotion that's causing you to cry isn't valid and it's not worth expressing. Okay. And you can't do that. You can't take little parts of what it is to be a human being and say, well, this isn't good, so we're going to never do this again. Right. They're all good. It's all part of your system. There's a reason for all of it. And so we allow it in spaces that are safe to allow it, right? Maybe it looks like asking for help and believing that you deserve that help. That can be hard, especially if our internal narrative or our childhood upbringing told us that, you don't deserve help. Asking for help is weakness, right? If you need help, if you need, external assistance, then, that makes your worth plummet, right? Maybe these are some things that we're telling ourselves when we realize we're telling ourselves that, right? But saying I need help and I deserve help, that can be hard for some of us, right? But it's a way that we repair. It's a way that we heal. Okay. Um, Maybe the way that you repair is offering yourself kindness, right? You're always giving kindness to other people. Maybe just portion a little bit back to yourself. Start a self-compassion practice, start a self-kindness practice, right? So every time you tend to your own need, you're kind of polishing that mirror, right? You're getting a more clear reflection of who you are, what you need, and how can you make healing a priority in your everyday life, right? So we can soften this by making caregiving less about sacrifice and more about our shared humanity, right? You are evolving through this process. Okay, this is a life-changing role for a lot of us, right? And so with any change, there's going to be disruption, there's going to be upheaval. Okay. And that doesn't mean it's bad or wrong. It's just the natural course of things, right? You can't build a foundation without digging up the dirt. Okay. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So examples again, how to tend to your own needs, how to be aware and healing. Set a gentle boundary. Doesn't have to be a huge, slamming a door in somebody's face. It can just be like, I'd like to help, but I just don't have the energy, or no, thank you, right? That's a good boundary. Speaking kindly to yourself. Oftentimes we get in these spaces where we are really, really mean to ourselves. I shouldn't feel this way. Yes, you should. Of course you do, right? Of course you feel that way. Speaking kindly to yourself isn't just, a woo-woo new age pop psychology thing. We are always talking to ourselves. And sometimes we say things to ourselves that we would never utter to another human being. So just be aware of those times. What are you telling yourself? Why are you telling yourself that? And why do you believe it? Right? Introspection. Take a time or take a moment to be alone with guilt. And it make it hard. It can be hard. But if you were asking your guilt, why am I feeling guilty? What am I doing that, is worthy of this expression, right? Take some time and just figure it out. Be curious. And then name it aloud to someone who's safe, right? I'm feeling resentful because I'm feeling grief because, right? And that can be very, very helpful. Once you name something, it often loses a lot of its power, a lot of its hold on you. All right. So this is a little poem, blessing, whatever you want to call it, just a little word for you. The mirror is not cruel, it's honest. It shows you not just where you break, but where you still burn. You may meet your reflection, or may you meet your reflection not with shame, but with sacred softness. It's a part of you, right? It's there for a reason. Listen to it. You may still see the child waiting. May you listen and may you tend. It's never too old to tend to your inner child. They're always with you. And may caregiving not erase you, but reveal you more tenderly than before. We have these feelings and we shame ourselves for them. We're not being very tender to ourselves. We're not being very kind to ourselves. Okay. So we can acknowledge that we feel this way and we can understand why we feel this way. We can be compassionate, okay? And that will kind of alleviate some of the guilt or the shame that maybe comes with some of these not so pleasant feelings, right? Again, the mirror effect, the introspection, it's not to judge ourselves, it's to reveal unmet needs, unmet passions, right? So oftentimes as caregivers, we kind of disappear, right? The person we're caring for takes the main stage, and that's okay, right? But you're not meant to disappear as a person, okay? You can't keep putting yourself off until caregiving ends, especially if you're caregiving for somebody and you're in it for the long haul, right? Lifelong, right? You can't constantly put yourself on the back burner if you're going to consistently be in this space. You have to allow yourself some time at the foreground too, okay? So you're not meant to become a perfect quote unquote caregiver when you do these things, right? Not always calm, but just real, right? A human being, allowing yourself to have feelings that are unpleasant or to be confused or, say, hey, I'm not where I want to be here, but I'm working toward it, and giving yourself grace in that process, right? Shame and guilt are only going to make things worse. So if we approach ourselves, our pain, our unmet needs with compassion and kindness and understanding, then shame and guilt are going to kind of remove themselves from the equation, and they're going to quit exacerbating those feelings. Okay. So that's all I have for you today. It was short and sweet, wasn't the full hour, wasn't super science heavy, is more of an emotional, introspective type space, but that's kind of the theme for the month. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share here.